The invitation came through email, short, vague, and oddly formal. Family estate update, Saturday noon, 1427, Willow Creek. No subject line, no warm greeting, just coordinates dropped like a breadcrumb trail back to a life I had no interest in revisiting. The address was familiar, of course, that worn-down two-story home in Houston that still smelled like stale coffee and old carpet. I hadn't been inside it in nearly a decade, not since Mom's funeral. And now, apparently, Dad had followed her. Not that anyone bothered to call me directly. When I pulled into the driveway, the others were already there. Familiar cars, familiar tension. I sat in my Tesla for a moment, watching the windows, hearing the past echo like it had never left. My sister's laughter floated from the kitchen. Of course she was already making herself at home. She always did. I walked in without knocking. The living room was frozen in time. Framed photos of her high school trophies, her wedding, her kids. Me? I barely made the wall. One baby picture, slightly crooked. "Look who finally showed up," Aunt Denise mumbled, not even pretending to smile. "Nice to see you too," I said, brushing past her. We gathered in the den. A man in a suit stood beside the fireplace. The lawyer, I guessed. Dad's final words were about to be unsealed. My stomach knotted, not from grief, but anticipation. Not once in my life had this family offered me anything other than doubt. So why now? The man cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. As executor of the estate, I've been asked to deliver the final terms of the will." I barely heard the opening lines. Then, "To my eldest daughter, Catherine, I leave a sum of $300,000. The room fell silent. My ears buzzed. I stared straight ahead, unmoving. "To my youngest, Madeline, nothing is to be distributed at this time." Catherine's hand landed on my shoulder with fake tenderness. "I'm sure Dad had his reasons," she whispered, as if that settled anything. As if I should nod and smile like we weren't all pretending I didn't exist. I didn't flinch. I didn't ask why. I just looked at her, really looked, and saw what they all saw. The obedient daughter, the golden child. And me? I was a ghost in the family photo. They didn't know who I'd become. I left as soon as the papers were signed, walked straight out without a word. The house behind me felt smaller than I remembered, like it had shrunk under the weight of its secrets. My mind wandered to the days I spent in that house, alone on Christmas mornings while they vacationed in Aspen. No one noticed I stayed back. They assumed I preferred silence, birthdays forgotten, awards overlooked. I once won a citywide science fair and got a pat on the head while Catherine got a new car for passing Algebra 2. "Your sister's the practical one," Dad would say, slicing roast at dinner. "You're too dreamy." Dreamy. That was his word for stubborn, for different, for not needing him. So I found my own way. I worked double shifts at the bookstore while finishing community college. I applied for scholarships they never asked about. And when they said my idea for a startup was childish, I built it anyway, in my car, in coffee shops, in shared apartments with peeling wallpaper and no AC. I didn't succeed to prove them wrong. I succeeded to survive. As I slid behind the wheel of my Tesla, the screen lit up with notifications, missed calls, investor alerts. My assistant had texted twice. "Forbes wants your quote, $50 million valuation confirmed." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just exhaled and tapped the folder in my glove box, the one labeled "The Plan." It wasn't revenge I wanted, just clarity, just the truth laid bare. Because even with success, even with the headlines, that old house still echoed in me. Sometimes silence is where strength hides, and strength, I had plenty of that now. I pulled out of the driveway, drove past the familiar streets, past the diner where Catherine once ditched me after prom, past the school where I ate lunch alone. The city hadn't changed. But I had. They still saw the girl who wasn't invited. But I was no longer asking to be let in. Even now, I could feel that child in me still bleeding, still asking why. Why wasn't I enough? Why did they never see? But this time, I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't beg. I'd open the door myself. And walk through it. I parked outside my office. Glass walls, rooftop deck, the skyline behind it like a crown. I sat there for a moment, letting the weight of it all settle. What was success if those who mattered most never believed you had it in you? I opened the folder. Inside, blueprints, timelines, names. It was time to return, not just as a visitor, but as a storm. There was a photo, just one. Me, in a borrowed cap and gown, standing stiffly in front of the high school gym doors. The tassel was too short, the smile too forced. Aunt Linda took it with an old digital camera and handed me the memory card like it was enough. Marilla was in Cabo. Dad was tied up with something at the office. Mom was gone by then. No flowers, no dinner, not even a card. That day, I stood on the lawn while other families laughed and took dozens of photos. My classmates hugged their siblings. I held on to that one snapshot, printed it at Walgreens, taped it inside a drawer. No one ever asked for a copy, not once. And that, I realized years later, was the last time I was celebrated. The last time anyone in my bloodline looked at me and thought, she did something worth showing up for. When people disappear from your life long enough, you stop asking why. You start making up stories to protect your heart. They're busy. They didn't know. It's fine. I was sipping my second coffee of the morning when my phone lit up. A message from my assistant. Thought you'd want to see this, Channel 12. I clicked the link. There she was. Marilla. Full makeup, big curls, pastel blazer like she ran a nonprofit, not a trust fund. The headline beneath her read, Houston businesswoman talks legacy and loss. She smiled at the host, all calculated charm. It wasn't always easy, she said, feigning vulnerability. After my father passed, I had to carry the torch for our family. Even with the drama, I stayed grounded. I stared at the screen, jaw tightening. She's just saying what they want to hear, I muttered. But the comment section didn't care. Such grace under pressure. Always the strong one. She deserves it all. I wanted to throw my phone. Instead, I let it ring. My old mentor, Ross, popped up. You watching this crap? He barked. Yeah. You're gonna let that stand? There was a long pause. I watched the screen freeze on Marilla's smile. Polished, practiced, fraudulent. No, I said quietly. Not anymore. That afternoon, I took a walk around my building's rooftop garden, phone in hand, air thick with summer heat. When the call came from Forbes, I nearly didn't answer. Miss Kane, we'd like to feature you in our next Under the Radar Entrepreneurs column. $50 million valuation is hard to ignore. I hesitated. I never wanted to be a face. I liked building quietly. But silence only worked until someone else took your story and rewrote it. I'm listening, I said. As they asked for background, I found myself wandering back to my early days, sleeping on a blow-up mattress beside a server rack, eating peanut butter straight from the jar, pitching angel investors with notes scribbled on the back of napkins. No press, no family, just grit. By the time the interview wrapped, they had their quote. Legacy isn't about what you're handed, it's about what you create in spite of being overlooked. That night, I met with Elaine, my attorney, and Joseph, my assistant, in my downtown office. We need a statement, Joseph said. Public, professional, clean. Facts only, I replied, but sharp ones. Elaine opened her laptop. Marilla made a small misstatement in the interview. She claimed she ran Dad's foundation since 2014, but records show she didn't get involved until 2017. That's a 3-year gap, enough to plant questions. Joseph looked at me. Want me to leak it? I shook my head. No, we don't fight with mud, we fight with mirrors. This wasn't revenge. It was about correcting the narrative. Not for them, but for me. For that girl who never got a graduation dinner. We mapped out a strategy. Quiet, strategic, precise. A storm doesn't always roar. Sometimes it rolls in with stillness and swallows everything. Before heading home, I made a final note on my calendar. Amarilla's charity gala, Saturday. Not invited. Didn't matter. The next morning I took the long way back from a meeting just to pass the old house. The blinds were different. Someone had painted the porch, but the ache in my chest was exactly the same. I parked for a moment and just watched. I used to sit there as a teenager, hoping someone would see me, that maybe this time the porch light would flick on for me too. I'd make up reasons to walk by, pretending I forgot something, waiting for a wave, a nod, a call inside. This time, I didn't need to be seen. This time, I wasn't looking for an open door. I was preparing to kick one down. My reflection in the rear view wasn't soft. It wasn't begging. It looked back with sharp edges. "She said I wasn't part of the story," I whispered. "I'm about to rewrite the whole book." 2 years back, we sat around a circular table at Dad's favorite steakhouse in Dallas. It was the kind of place he loved: dim lights, leather booths, and overpriced Cabernet. I'd flown in from a pitch meeting in Seattle, still buzzing from closing a six-figure seed round. I wore the best blazer I owned, heels that pinched, and a hope I wasn't ready to admit. I thought maybe this dinner would be different. Maybe they'd ask what I was building, but the night wasn't about me. The moment Marilla walked in, the whole table shifted. Glasses clinked, hugs flew around. She'd just been promoted at the firm, some lateral move padded with a new title. Dad beamed. Aunt Linda called her our little lioness. No one asked how my trip was. I tried to share, started a sentence with, "Actually, my team just hit." Marilla cut in, raising her glass. "Startups are cute. You get to fail in hoodies and call it innovation." They laughed. I sipped my wine, didn't speak. Not out of grace, just habit. Years of knowing my words didn't land. That night, I learned applause has a volume. Mine didn't echo. Back in the present, I was at my kitchen island, thumbing through emails, when Joseph sent the invite. "You've been asked to appear on the Real Grit podcast. They're doing a series on self-made founders." I almost declined. I didn't do spotlights. Then came his follow-up. "FYI, Marilla's also invited. They want a sibling contrast angle." I stared at my phone. My thumb hovered over the delete button. Instead, I said out loud, "Not this time." I texted Joseph back. "Book it, but tell them, I'm not coming to entertain comparisons. I'm coming to tell the truth." The podcast studio was warmer than I expected. Homey, fake plants on bookshelves, 2 chairs and a mic setup. Marilla walked in late. Gucci heels, flawless contour, fake sincere smile. I didn't rise. The host welcomed us. "We've got quite the episode today. 2 sisters, 1 legacy. Let's talk about grit." I spoke first. Not fast, not flashy. I talked about warehouse nights, living on lentils, signing my first check for payroll when my account had $42 left. I didn't name names, didn't sling mud, just told my path. Then Marilla chimed in, tone dripping sugar. "Some of us were built to lead, others to dream. Both have value, as long as we know which is which." The host glanced at me, curious. "Sounds like there's some history here." I met his eyes, then Marilla's. "History is only useful if everyone agrees on the facts," I said, and nothing more. After we left the studio, I barely made it to the curb before the pings started. Joseph again. Check Instagram. There it was, a carousel post from Marilla. First photo, her on the mic, mid-laugh. Second photo, a quote card. "True leaders don't cry to get ahead. They build, they don't beg." The caption, "Not all stories are worth hearing. Hashtag earned, not given." Subtle, calculated. Poison dressed as empowerment. The comments split. "Preach, queen. Is this shade at someone? She's always been the strong one." I scrolled. My chest burned, not with shame, but with something colder. It's one thing to be ignored, it's another to be rewritten. I opened an old file on my laptop, receipts, emails from my first investors, time-stamped contracts, screenshots from Marilla once asking if I'd loop her in with my PR firm. Joseph called. "You want to respond?" "Not yet," I said. "We're not playing the same game. Let her play checkers. I'll move like chess." That night, I sat by my apartment window, journal in hand. The skyline shimmered, too loud to hear my own thoughts. I opened a drawer and pulled out a letter, Dad's handwriting. "Proud of who you're becoming. Just wish you were more stable, like your sister." I folded it back up. Maybe silence once felt noble, like restraint, but silence can rot you from the inside out. I crumpled the paper, tossed it in the bin. I've waited my whole life to be seen. Maybe the mirror was facing the wrong direction. My phone lit up again. Joseph's voice was breathless. "You're on the front page of Business Review, and not because of your net worth." I hadn't stepped foot in my old bedroom in Flagstaff for over a decade. But there I was, quiet, unsure what I was even looking for. The air still carried that strange scent of dust, wood polish, and something more faint, like forgotten promises. The desk sat where it always had, under the creaky window facing the pines. A stack of old family awards leaned against the wall, bent at the corners. I started to push them aside, mostly to make space to think, when something caught my eye. It was spiral-bound, cheap paper, corners dog-eared. My notebook. The one I thought I'd lost the summer I turned 16. I picked it up like it might crumble. Inside, ink faded but legible, were pages of me. Teenage dreams scribbled in late-night thoughts. Business names, sketches, ideas. Build it better. Don't wait for their green light. I remembered writing that after my father looked over one page and said, "You're always dreaming, Sedona. Try being practical sometime." That was him trying to sound wise, but it felt like being pushed out of my own skin. I turned another page. My heart clenched. Then the door creaked open. Mom walked in, holding something wrapped in cloth. She stood silent for a second, then unwrapped it slowly like it mattered. It was the small wooden statuette Dad gave me when I was 12, hand-carved, shaped like a tiny fox. He'd handed it to me on a camping trip, whispered, "You matter. You just do." She walked over to the mantel in the family room and placed it there, firm and slow. "I found this in the attic. Figured it belonged in the house." She said it loud enough for everyone within earshot. Dad stayed quiet. Marilla, lounging on the far side of the room, glanced up, smirked. "Thanks, Mom," she said. "Finally found something that belonged to someone quiet." I didn't flinch, just stared at the statuette, then back at her. They'd always used quiet like it was a flaw. I smiled slightly and nodded. "Thanks." But I didn't pick it up. Let it sit there. Let them see it. Let them wonder why. That night, back in Phoenix, I pulled the notebook under my desk lamp. Pages were loose, and halfway through, I noticed something that stopped my breath. Several middle pages were ripped out. Torn, not cleanly removed. Jagged edges, missing dates. I flipped forward and back. It didn't make sense until I noticed what was gone. Entries where I detailed my first pitch ideas. The ones I'd nervously shared one night at dinner with the whole family around. The same pitch Dad later dismissed with a chuckle. "That fanciful idea from last summer? Probably better left forgotten." I grabbed my phone and texted Beaumont. "Did you ever see that first deck I made in '09? Think someone got to it." He replied in seconds. "You had some killer angles in there. What happened?" I didn't answer. Instead, I opened a new doc and began rewriting from memory. I wasn't going to let someone else decide which parts of my story got told. The next morning, I called a friend who ran a gallery space downtown. "I want to set up something small, a story exhibit, just me." I didn't mention family. I didn't need to. We planned for 2 weeks out. I hired a designer, chose a photo of me at 13 holding the fox statuette in one hand and that same notebook clutched to my chest. I made it the central image. Caption read, "This is where I started, not where I was left." We curated everything. My first business sketch. Early rejection letters. Annotated timelines. All of it. I placed the restored notebook in a glass case. Next to it, the fox, its paint faded and base worn from years of being ignored. The point wasn't revenge. It was to show truth, unedited. I invited my old teachers, a few investors, some journalists I respected. No family, no need. That evening, before the public arrived, I stood alone in the gallery. The lighting crew had just finished. The room hummed with quiet. I walked up to the display, touched the corner of the case. The fox sat still, proud. I opened the notebook to one page I'd rewritten by hand. "One day they will see I wasn't waiting for permission." I let that sit. A kind of tremble hit my chest. Not nerves, pride trying to break through 20 years of being second-guessed. I reached for the light switch to close up. Then my phone buzzed. A news alert popped up. Local reporter hints at exhibit stirring family drama. Sources say response already brewing. Chapter 5 has been completed and is ready for your review. Let me know when you're ready for Chapter 6. I stared at the cease and desist letter in my office late afternoon, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. My legal counsel, Avery, slid the envelope across the desk. Mostly intimidation, she said. I nodded. But a seed had been planted. My assistant, Joseph, hovered by the door. So, what now? His voice steady, not hopeful. I felt something lean inside me. Resolve. Now, we escalate, I said, almost quietly. I dusted off the keynote slides for the Women in Business Summit in Houston. I was supposed to speak. I would speak. I posted a teaser later. Building alone when no one else claps doesn't make me invisible. It makes me real. The backlash started fast. Trolls, whispers on LinkedIn, and a call from Dad at dusk. Cancel before you regret this, he warned. I hung up. Summit day dawned humid and gray. My speech outline had leaked. Some edits twisted my words. Rumors said I was going to publicly attack my family. Organizers shook their heads, worried. I checked backstage once. Security men nodded, doors locked tighter. I took a breath, stood up, and walked on stage. Lights, faces, cameras, streaming live. I spoke of late nights in steering committees, of loans I repaid, of the silence that teaches you more than applause ever will. I didn't name names, but when I said those who should have clapped first, the room shifted. I felt the weight of what was unsaid. I spoke about betrayal and broken promises, about what it means to carve your own path when every door behind you is locked. The standing ovation hit me in waves. In that moment, I knew I had crossed a line between staying quiet and taking power. Messages poured in, older women who felt unseen, entrepreneurs who had been overshadowed. I read them later, alone in my dressing room. One read, "You give voice to what many hide." It stung. It healed. But the fight came home. That evening, I opened my phone to a message from Marilla. "You think this makes you noble? You're just loud. No apology, no understanding, just accusation." Instead of replying, I archived it. I saved it, because sometimes silence after a roar is your sharpest weapon. I remembered Dad telling me once, "Real power is quiet." I whispered to the empty mirror, "Then maybe it's time to make noise." I walked into a boardroom the next morning for a meeting with one of my top brand investors. Their eyes didn't match their smile. The air was clipped. "We've heard things," they said. "Concerned that you're too controversial now." I nodded, careful. They passed me a printout, anonymous tip accusing me of fraud, painting parts of my journey as lies. I held the paper steady. My heart pounded, but I didn't tremble. "You know who sent this," I said, voice calm. "But the question is, what are you going to do about it?" Chapter 7. Strategy at High Noon. I drove into downtown Houston just after sunrise. The skyline looked sharp, windows gleaming. I parked across from the boardroom building, briefcase on passenger seat. My palms tingled, anger, pride, fatigue all mixed. Most of me felt ready. The scars left by past dinners and silent rooms throbbed, but I carried something stronger now. I walked in heavy soles, past receptionists who barely looked up. I didn't apologize for showing up. I greeted the board members with nods. No softness, no pretending. My voice steady when I said, "Thank you all for making the time." I set out my agenda, correcting the record, clarifying ownership, exposing how accusations floated without basis. They looked at me, surprised. I stood taller. They believed their version. I came to change it. Marilla swept in, dressed to command attention, tailored suit, sharp lines, confidence loaded. The board member beside her read something aloud. "Legacy status will remain with Lorelei Wells." I braced. That name had carried Dad's public face for years. I watched smirks, nods. Then I asked, quietly, "That status is fine. But who built the foundation?" I tapped a folder. Slides lit behind me showing early business reports, growth charts, my contribution when no one else cared. The room stiffened. Marilla's lips twitched. She tried to interrupt. I held my ground. Pride mingled with sorrow. Finally, the labor of invisible years saw daylight. Then came exposure. I clicked through emails Marilla sent, press releases attributing deals I closed, testimonials where investors thanked me behind closed doors. I showed side-by-side logs, what Marilla claimed versus what I delivered. Board members traded looks. Some frowned, others cleared throats. My voice shook at first, then steadied. The phrase hit, "Silence benefits the liar as much as the truth burdens them." I said it. Where I faltered in youth, I now had clarity. It wasn't guilt I felt, it was vindication. Marilla rose, defiant. "Cherry-picked? Misleading," she said. She tried pulling up my early debts, moments I struggled, hoping to turn sympathy back to her corner. But I had anticipated that move. I had my own counsel, external auditors, backups. I nodded when board members asked for proof. I let her sputter. Her facade cracked. She looked safe in her mask until I showed the stitches. I remained composed, not triumphal, just resolute. Chair paused, whispered with legal counsel across the table. A long beat. The air compressed. I exhaled. Marilla's jaw clenched. Then it came. "We will need 48 hours to review all evidence and make a decision on the legacy status." Silence settled. My heart beat loud in that quiet. I thought, my truth is no longer optional. Tomorrow they decide. Does my name stay hidden? Or does it finally get written? I walked the sculpture park just after sunset, phone in hand, waiting. The verdict was due any minute. I took the long path, the one with iron sculptures that always made me feel small in a good way. It gave me distance from the noise, from everything I'd carried into that boardroom. Each step echoed decisions, the ones I made, the ones made for me. That silence in my father's study when I asked to join the business. The time I loaned Marilla my proposal, and it ended up under her name, all those small thefts that people called family dynamics. Then my phone buzzed, just a text from my mother, no punctuation, no explanation. "I watched your speech. I'm proud of you." My throat caught. First time she said that in, maybe ever. An older woman approached slowly with a young girl in tow. "My granddaughter says you're her favorite speaker. She says you're brave." I smiled and nodded, not trusting my voice. And I thought, maybe this was never about legacy, not the way they meant it. Maybe it was about impact. Maybe you don't have to win the crown. Maybe you build the kingdom instead. The board called an hour later. I didn't sit down. I answered standing, back straight. The chair's tone was flat, formal. "We've reviewed the materials and reached a conclusion. Effective immediately, legacy attribution and strategic influence will be reassigned to Sedona Wells. Marilla Wells's prior role will be reviewed and audited." No cheers, no celebration music, just quiet from the boardroom, and a quiet yes from my assistant standing behind me. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. I thanked them. They ended the call. I stayed in that space for a minute. It wasn't victory. It was restoration. It was mine. Marilla didn't respond, not right away, and that silence felt different, not like avoidance, more like retreat. I waited, not in fear, not even in tension. I'd already made peace with what she'd choose. Later that night, the call came from a number I hadn't saved. I knew the voice before it finished the first word. "I always figured you'd leave us behind," he said. I said nothing. "Marilla stayed. You soared. I didn't know how to hold that." He didn't say sorry, not directly, but it was buried in there, between the cracks of his breath. "You didn't need us," he said. Maybe that scared me. "I never wanted to leave," I answered. "I just wanted room to breathe." The silence this time didn't hurt. It just felt honest. "I guess we all got something wrong," he said. And that was as close to healing as he could go. Maybe next time, I told him. Let the truth walk in before judgment does. We hung up. The next morning, headlines and hashtags started buzzing. Marilla had gone live on social media. An emotional breakdown, raw, streaming unfiltered. She said I'd taken everything, that she was always the one left behind, that Dad had chosen me in the end. Some people supported her, others didn't buy it. I didn't watch the whole thing. I didn't need to. We weren't enemies. We were just raised to compete. I jotted that down in my journal. I didn't respond publicly. No statement, no quote. Just one line to myself. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's freedom. By late afternoon, I sat at my home office. A sealed envelope sat in my palm. Thick paper, handwritten across the front. For my daughter. Open at 25. I opened the safe, placed it inside, and locked it. Inside was everything. The speeches, the betrayals, the late-night truths, the small wins no one clapped for. If you ever wonder who you are, I whispered, read this before the world tells you. Then I added quietly, for her and for me, because the truth, my love, is power, and it's yours to carry next. Chapter 9 is now complete and written per your full instructions. Let me know if you'd like to begin the next step or make revisions.